Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today, to celebrate International Women's Day that falls on March the 8th, we have a very special episode dedicated to women and the legacy of their female ancestors. I'm honored to be joined by two such incredible women who have made and continue to make a lasting impact in the Pittsburgh community. Natalie Bencivenga, aka Bencivenga today, and Verdiglione Davis. Natalie is a journalist, a social impact strategist, and advocate for storytelling that creates change. A former editor and columnist, she has used her voice to uplift and empower communities, particularly focusing on issues that affect women. Her work reflects a deep commitment to social justice, media literacy, and civic engagement. Natalie has been nominated for a Mid-Atlantic Emmy Award, recognized for her outstanding work in journalism. Rosa Verdiglione Davis is the executive director of POWER, Pennsylvania Organization for Women in Early Recovery, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women reclaim their lives from addiction. Under her leadership, POWER has expanded its programs to provide holistic support, empower women through recovery services, education, and advocacy. With a deep commitment to social justice and community wellness, Rosa has played a vital role in shaping policies and initiatives that uplift women and families across Pittsburgh. Together, we'll be discussing their journeys, the legacy of the women who came before them, and how they continue to shape the cultural and social fabric of Pittsburgh. Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring, in person or online, to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Welcome to the program, Natalie and Rosa. It's so great to have you both at the same time. I feel spoiled. I feel
I feel spoiled. When you said that Rosa was going to be on, I was like, sign me up. Any opportunity I have to engage with Rosa, she's such a powerhouse in the community. It's a special day. And Viviana, to get to be with you as well, my new friend, it's just a wonderful opportunity. So thanks so much.
Thank you. I totally agree. When Viviana said you were coming on, I was like, oh my goodness, we're each other's biggest fans.
Oh.
And the reason why, we have stories from Italy, we have stories from all over the United States and the world, but I wanted to really focus today's episode on women that make an impact in our community, in our backyard. So obviously your names will sound very familiar with whoever is going to listen from Pittsburgh, but I think we should do the going one step back and allow yourselves to introduce, share a little bit about your background and what brought you to the work you do today. I'm going to go in alphabetical order of last names, like in school. Natalie, would you want to do the honors first?
Sure. I've always been a creative and a writer, and I've always loved media and performing and all of those things as a kid. But I actually was very academically inclined and got accepted to medical school. And I thought I was going to do the doctor route, the science route. And I remember when I got into school, no one was surprised because my whole life I'd sort of been building up towards something like that. But when I actually got in, there were just parts of me that were just screaming to be seen. And I decided to defer my seat for a year. My parents were both very supportive of that and started to pursue creative endeavors, which led me to starting my own webzine in the mid-2000s, and did a lot of media work up in New York City, was writing for Teen Vogue, SheKnows.com, The Huffington Post. And I was even on Fox News. They had an online show back in the day. And that was how I sort of fell in love with the camera being very front facing, and realized the impact that media could have. And then went back, got my master's in social work because I wanted to ground the work that I was doing. And then beyond that, I realized that being a social worker was incredibly hard. And I learned so much from the communities I worked in, but I really missed doing media work. And so when the opportunity at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette brought itself to me in 2014, I applied for that. And that was sort of the turning point of my trajectory. And I really haven't looked back since. And I was there for about 6 years. And for the past 5 years, I've been an independent journalist. I started my own digital media consulting company with Sarah Bachnick. And I've done a lot of incredible projects, both regionally and nationally, focused on the work of community and bringing people to the table whose stories aren't always told. And so I look at my work as a journalist as not only a form of social work, but as an important pillar to uphold our democracy, because if journalists aren't speaking truth to power, then I think we're more of a PR company than anything else. So it's important that we recognize the power of the pen and utilize it in ways that benefit the many and not just the privileged few. So that's where my work has taken me over the years. And currently I work at KDK Radio as a host there. I'm also working with QED on some new exciting projects, and I have a lot of other digital partnerships in the community here and in Harrisburg as well. But it's a lot. You know, you're constantly building, reinventing. It's not for the faint of heart to do this work on your own, but we'll see what the future holds. But for right now, it's been a very exciting time. And I also do love being a strategist as well, and helping other companies and people all over the country build their brands and share their unique perspectives. And Viviana, the one thing I will say, and I know we'll talk about our grandmothers later, but I remember when I first started working at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and you know, all of my great grandparents came from Italy. And so my grandmother, when she saw my byline in the Post-Gazette, she put it up on the fridge, as every grandmother does, and said, "I can't believe if you're, you know, if my mother, my great grandmother, could see that our name is in the paper in this way, just my gosh, the pride, because coming from nothing and just a few generations later to see where your lineage and your family can go." That to me was really what the American dream, I think, meant for my grandmothers, was this idea that someday that energy that they put out there would come back in a positive way to their family. So I hold on to that, because I know we can reclaim that in this country if we decide to work together and build that dream for, once again, the many.
Thank you for sharing your journey. And Rosa, talking about building, we have also, I can see from my house what is happening, the amazing expansion of power. But before we get to talk about this massive endeavor that you have been conquering really brick by brick, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to the position that you currently have.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm been excited about it since you reached out. So I had a different experience than Natalie. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I was born in Rochester, New York, but really grew up in rural Pennsylvania and came to Pittsburgh when I came to college and at the University of Pittsburgh, and then stayed. But I would say that I always knew I wanted to be in social work. That's something Natalie and I have in common. We both have masters in social work. And I knew that from a very early age. And I'm guessing that it was really, that decision was influenced by a lot of things. Two major things. I was in a fire when I was a baby. I was 14 months old, and I had about 33 operations by the time I was 15. And that experience of being so vulnerable and with parents who could barely speak English at the time, it made me want to be in a helping position when I got older. I also had two amazing parents who I adored. and was particularly close with my mom, who was a really strong woman. Of the two, my mom is the one that learned English very rapidly. She eventually became an American citizen. My father spoke broken English till the day he died. He really struggled to let go of his roots, I guess. And my mom didn't let go ever. Because she was a proud Italian woman, but she knew how to maneuver in a new world. And she knew that learning and education was going to be important if she was going to navigate, first of all, the medical issues that I had, the surgeries, the doctors, all of that. So my mom was a huge influencer in my life, and never let me use my scars to hold myself back. She, in fact, encouraged me to work harder, and always told me every day till the day she died how beautiful I was. And so having a strong role model who had been through so much herself and always kind of led the way, I'm certain that not only led to my decision to go into the field I'm in, but to strive to help others get there as well.
Mhm. So for you, Rosa, let's talk a little bit about maybe one of your most meaningful moments when you got to work and you got to see people indeed that maybe had the chance to grieve. They were not grieving, they were not acknowledging that they were at some point in a situation in their life where they had a loss. And also the disparity of people's perception towards addiction that is based on gender. Some people get almost like excused, but if a woman falls and has children into addiction, they get blamed twice as much. Can you tell us what's your experience with all the stories, the data, the statistics that are out there that people might not realize?
Sure. First of all, close to 90% of women who enter substance use treatment have histories of trauma. That could be early childhood sexual assault, partner violence, losing a child, the fire I was in. So much trauma. And sometimes addiction is a response, is a symptom of that trauma. In terms of an experience, what I remember mostly, I've been at Power now 32 years. And very early on, before coming to Power, by the way, I was a juvenile court probation officer, foster care worker. I worked in the school system. I had always worked with mostly adolescents and their families. And so coming to Power was the first time I was working where the primary client was an adult woman. And I always thought when I worked with my kids that I was the most objective, non-judgmental counselor, that I loved my kids. I loved their families. I didn't blame their families. And then I came to Power, and I was working with all adult women, and I realized that even if it was subconscious, I think when you work with kids, you want to blame someone for their situation, right? And so now I'm working with women, adult women, and I quickly learn no parent, no mother asks to become alcoholic. No one asks to have a problem with drugs or alcohol. No one says when they're young, I think I want to grow up and ruin my life and my family's life. And I remember one time early on being at my desk, and there was a payphone at the top of the steps. So that's how long ago it was. And I overheard a woman on the phone with her daughter. Her daughter was about 8 or 9 years old. And I heard her say, "Oh, honey, please don't cry. Please don't cry. Mommy is so proud of you for being brave and patient and letting me have this time to get well. And we're going to be a family again." I still get choked up when I think of that conversation. And in that moment, it hit me of how much she loved her child and how much she wanted to be a family and how hard this work was. And I think that it stuck with me. It was a turning point for me where I truly learned not to be judgmental at all, that nobody, whatever their pain is asking for that pain. And you are so right, Viviana, about the stigma associated with addiction. You know, when you hear about a man going to treatment, what do you hear? oh, did you hear about John? He finally went into treatment. Isn't that a wonderful thing he's doing for his family? If Susan goes into treatment, did you hear about Susan? She went into treatment. What about her kids? How could she leave her kids? So definitely a double standard. You are right about that.
And maybe even the numbers that we see as statistics might not be truthful, because for a woman to come out, they really have to come out twice, so to speak. And so maybe those numbers are much lower than
underreported.
Natalie, you are in the world of media. You probably had to navigate through a type of also scenario job that could have been, I don't want to say male dominated, but how did you tell us a little bit how you carve in a space for yourself? And also, it's a big change from a scene column where there is a portrayal of a certain layer of society and events, and then being smart about it, because you shared in a talk that you gave on Friday how you were able then to introduce the reality of the many different faces of Pittsburgh. They are not always in the papers.
Yes. So it's been interesting because I've dealt with a lot of sexism in the industry as well as ageism. When I started at the Post-Gazette, for instance, I was 30. I was one of the youngest people in the newsroom, and I was met with a lot of resistance from editors and managers when I would propose new ways of doing things, new ideas. I was one of the very first people to truly embrace social media and put myself out there as a brand. That was very frowned upon in the mid to 2010s, if you will. It was still very much considered legacy newsrooms. You hide behind your column, you don't come forward. And I was seeing so much change happening across the country. And like I said, I had been working in New York for a while. We were not at the forefront of that here in Pittsburgh media. And so I began to use my platform as a way to brand myself and also the column in a new and fresh way. And so when I started, I was met with a lot of resistance, but because I have such strong women in my family who have overcome many more things than I ever did. In fact, the reason I would be able to stand on their shoulders was because of what they were able to do in their own lives, fighting against injustices, big and small. It gave me a lot of courage, right? And so I just pushed back, and I always lived by the mantra, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Especially as a young woman in media, you don't get anywhere. And the further you start to push, the more male dominated it would become. And I've applied for a lot of jobs over the years, and I've heard a lot of the same things. We don't know how you'd fit in here was one that I've heard more than once. You're too controversial, things like that. So when I started with the scene column in particular, I realized I did not feel connected to the society page. I was not raised that way. I was very middle class, grew up in a suburb of the city, was very lucky, had a lovely, safe, healthy childhood. But, the society page eluded me. So when I started, my immediate editor was very supportive of my work. And she said, do what you want to do. That's why we hired you. Like, we need someone that's going to shake it up. And so I said to myself, well, I worked in all of the communities around the city. I worked in the Hill District. I worked in Turtle Creek. I worked in Glassport. I worked in, Wilkinsburg and Hazelwood. And there's a lot of incredible community activity happening. There's a lot of events happening, and they're not being talked about. And so instead of just putting out the same $500 plate dinner events, I started making space for other community events. And I knew I was doing something right when some CEOs started calling and demanding that I realize that this is their page and that they didn't want to share it. And, Viviana, having that kind of power at 30 as a young woman was something else, because I was like, oh my gosh, these guys I'm ruffling feathers here, because the scene column had represented such a specific thing for so long. And so I wasn't removing them from the page, but the fact that they had to now share space with other organizations, they weren't getting the entire front page. They were getting maybe a part of it, or maybe they weren't on the front cover. Maybe I was posting a totally new group on the cover. But every single community in this city deserved to be recognized and deserved support. And having worked as a social worker, I realized the importance of media attention, because I worked with so many small nonprofits that they would say, oh, we'd love to get this corporation to sponsor our event, but we don't have any media. So they're going to look at our company and be like, well, you're a nobody. Nobody's ever reported on you. So what I started doing was created this column called Let's Make a Scene. And I would highlight small, tiny nonprofits in Pittsburgh and even add a wish list of things they needed. And people started sending them what they needed. And that was when I realized that this wasn't just about words. This was about action. This was solutions-driven journalism. This was using a community space that could actually improve our community. And that was when the light bulbs in my head started going off, that I could use my platforms for things much bigger than myself or even my column. It could be something that could truly impact the community. And so I took the next few years and I tried to meet with everybody from every community organization, whoever wanted to get a coffee or a lunch or whatever, and connect with me. And I grew my network so much that communities that had once felt a lot of distrust from legacy media were willing to talk to me, were willing to connect with me, because we were seeing one another in our full humanity. And so for me, being able to do this work, and I had highlighted power in many different ways over the years, because I also, my family, I have people that died from addiction in my family and that are living with addiction currently. And so I recognize the need and the importance of organizations like Power to commit to changing our communities in this compassionate, people first way. And so to me, the pushback that I got was nothing compared to the love that I received and was able to perpetuate into the space. And Viviana, as you know, when we talked about love during my talk on Friday, the thing that I say is love in action is justice. So if we're pushing that narrative of finding the justice and the injustices in space and how do we correct those as a community, then we are leading with love, which is what I want my work to do.
Wonderful. Rosa, when did you cross paths with Natalie? And again, maybe going back to the type of atmosphere and that Power offers to women in recovery. The pandemic, obviously, I would assume, has impacted even more, made those women even more vulnerable, people that maybe didn't have the ability to leave their household, right? That were victims. So tell us a little bit about that, and then your interaction with Natalie to bring the mission of Power known to the public.
So, addiction is a disease of isolation. And so if you can imagine during the pandemic, when people were so isolated, weren't able to leave their homes, there is research that shows that substance use problems increased dramatically during and after the pandemic. We kept our facility open during the pandemic. We had 25 women living and receiving intensive treatment in Powerhouse in Swissvale when the pandemic hit. And thanks to amazing women who all jumped in to help, because the Powerhouse staff themselves were coming down with COVID as well. They would have to have time off. Then at one point, many women, many of the clients and staff had COVID. It was a really challenging time, but everyone in the whole agency really stepped up to support each other and to make sure that women had a safe place to remain during the pandemic and beyond. It's incredibly important work, as you know, and between the stigma, the concern for resources, and now with some of what's going on in the world, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. So certainly getting the message out is critical to an organization like Power. And Natalie has always been a supporter. I don't know if she remembers, but I can't remember how we met or when, but I feel like I've known her forever. And I suspect it probably was some volunteers who had been working with us who were friends with Natalie and knew Natalie well and maybe introduced us. But I remember once seeing on Pittsburgh today, and Natalie gave a shout out that I didn't know she was going to do about power. And I was, oh my goodness, Natalie, I love you. That was so kind. And she's right. She gives the attention and helps spread the word about so many nonprofits, not just the huge, very well-known organizations, but really all organizations. And I'm guessing probably a lot that are close to her heart. And so fortunately, Power is one organization that's close to Natalie's heart. So whenever she can give us a shout out, she does. She helps to educate the community about the work that we do. She emceed the Purple Party the year that I got the award. And so that was really special. I was happy that it was Natalie. And you know, just listen to her talk. Who doesn't want Natalie speaking on their behalf? It can make a world of difference. She has entree into areas that an organization like ours may not have, but she is always willing to help open the doors and introduce, and that has really, really been beneficial for Power.
I'm going to
Rosa.
show a picture of the beautiful exhibit that went on at the Frick Museum of the Red Dress. And this was the Calico project that seen, I think, 150 people involved into embroidering this beautiful outfit, and Power has their signature on it. Rosa, do you remember something about this initiative? Because it was very special to see that dress coming together.
Yes, I do. The women who were receiving treatment at Powerhouse during that time were able to participate and make some of the work that you see and sign their names and Power's names. And it was really meaningful for them and certainly an honor for the organization.
So it's a legacy that we all got to enjoy. It is not by coincidence that I brought up dresses and clothing. So we're going to go into a little commercial break, and then we are going to come back with Natalie and Rosa, and we'll be talking about women and clothes. Applying for Italian citizenship? Need documents translation? Istituto Mondo Italiano provides certified translations and assistance services. Be sure to visit us at istitutomondoitaliano.org and schedule your free consultation. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for over 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Visit laprima.com to get La Prima Espresso coffee at your door. Welcome back. Thank you for continuing to tune in, listening to our conversation with Rosa Verdiglione Davis and Natalie Bencivenga or Bencivenga. And we just look at a wonderful dress that was presented during the Red Dress exhibit at the Frick. And this is also one common thing that Natalie and Rosa share is their love for fashion, whether they're stylish themselves or maybe they inherited that. Okay. So I know something about Rosa. So how about you tell us? I was looking also at the origin of the last names because they're not really your average Italian last name. So for the Verdiglione, I think we can trace it back to Rome or somewhere in the area. Bencivenga was a little more challenging for me because you can find it throughout Italy. And then I started to look into the Zaccari, which is your grandma's maiden name. And even there were certain concentrations, maybe in Puglia, but I couldn't find actual details. So Natalie, where is one of the two grandmothers coming from?
Yeah, so my grandmother that you're referring to, her name's Carmela, and her last name was Zachary, and then she married my grandfather Bencivenga. So she was really into genealogy. My grandma got really into it into her 70s, and so she has binders. And when she passed, she gave them to me. We would go through them all together. but it was all over the place. I mean, it was all over the boot, so to speak. But she made me laugh once because I was going to Egypt when I was in like 21, 22, and I'd always wanted to go. And she just hands me this like a printout, and it just has a tombstone on it, and it says Mena, because Mena was her mother's maiden name.
Okay.
And she goes, when you go over to Egypt, can you look for this? It's like, it was such a grandma thing to say, like, while you're over there. And here she had traced our lineage on her mother's side all the way to Egypt. And so she wanted to know if I could find this. And I of course, took it with me. And I said, yes, Graham, I will happily look for this in Egypt while I'm there. Never found it, but it just made me laugh. So I do know that we have, on my mother's side, we've traced back to Calabria.
Okay.
And Calabrese. And I know that there's on my grandfather's, on my dad's side, there's also Southern Italian, but I don't have a lot of information on my mother's side. The records weren't well kept, and there is a lot of confusion about where her family is really from. But we do know her maiden name, excuse me, my mother's maiden name is Chetta, and we do know that there was a lot of family in the very north of Italy, almost near Austria. So I don't know. I have a lot of guesses, and I know that Calabria is a part of that history, but I'm not really sure outside of that. But I will say my brother, I never did the 23andMe thing, but my brother did. And we all laughed because when he came back with his results, it said he's more Italian than people that are from Italy. So we do know the Italian genes are strong. I just, I can give you a few pockets, but beyond that, I'm not really sure, which is always kind of interesting. You can only trace it back so far. So if you have any knowledge, I'm here.
Rosa, we see a beautiful woman here, full of spunk from that smile. Tell us all about the Giacomina. And obviously both your mom and your dad and their journey. What brought them from Rome all the way to the United States?
So that my mom was 20 years old there. They were coming from Italy on the ship to the States. They had met and married in Rome. My mom is from northern Italy. She's from a region called Emilia-Romagna, and my father is from Calabria. And he was working in Rome. He was a tailor. And my mom went to work for him, and they got married. And so he had been recruited by a fashion clothing factory in Rochester, New York. And my mom always tells the funniest story about when they arrived, with $5 in their pocket. They couldn't speak English and nobody was there to greet them. They arrived, I guess, in New York City, and nobody was there like they had promised. And some kind man helped them get a hotel room for the night and gave them money to get on the bus in the morning. And they went to Rochester, New York, where I was born, within a year of my parents coming to the States. And then we moved to a completely different experience when we moved to Pennsylvania. In Rochester, the whole neighborhood was Italian. My parents spoke Italian. I spoke really only Italian until I was about 5. And then we moved to rural PA, where we were literally one of 5 Italian families. The population was about 4,000, maybe 5,000 then. And the 5 Italian families, they were all tailors. The fathers were all tailors. And so we stuck together, clearly stuck together. I remember so many holidays insieme, together, all of us. And it was such a different experience, I'm sure, for my parents, who came from first Italy, and then an Italian community in the States, and then eventually to where they were clearly a minority. But it was a good childhood, and my friends loved coming to my house. There was always great food. My mom was funny and, like you said, spunky, and could make everyone feel comfortable. And so but interesting, my brother had a totally different experience. I speak some Italian now. My brother speaks no Italian. And, I said, how is it that we grew up in the same house? Now, we are 7 years apart. I was in college when he was probably I guess about 12. And he said that school was not an easy place for him, especially being Italian, and he didn't want anyone to hear our parents speaking Italian, and that he got a little bit bullied. And I don't know if some of that is difference between boys and girls, or the time difference. I don't know, but my friends loved coming to my house, and I was very proud of being Italian and wish I had kept my Italian up. But everyone saw my mom in particular as kind of exotic, and just the place to be, where he didn't like to bring people home.
That's interesting that you said that, because we also have tailors in our family, especially the men in our family. And when my mother's mother, when they came to the United States, they thought my great grandmother had scarlet fever, but she was pregnant with my grandmother, and so they sent her to Iowa. And so that's where my mother's side is from, is Iowa. And so my mother had a very different experience growing up. They grew up in poverty. They had a huge garden, and that was where all the food came. They did everything from scratch on their own. But they lived on the south side of this tiny town called Keokuk, and the south side was where all the poor people were, where the Italians were, where Black people lived. And so it was a very integrated neighborhood, and everybody was very protective of each other. And I'll never forget the one story my grandmother told, which was the night that the KKK came to my grandmother's house and they burned a cross in her yard. And I think, we forget, because, we grow up in a different existence now as, I think, American Italians, being removed from that experience. But there was so much hate and prejudice against Italian communities, even only 50, 60 years ago. And I always remember my grandmother saying to me, that we're no different from anyone else, and that's why you treat everyone with dignity and respect. And that was just something that was very much ingrained in me as a little girl. Like, my grandmother would sell tomatoes in Iowa. They had all these tomatoes, and she would sell them to prostitutes because no one else would buy from them. And my grandma was like, well, they got to eat too. Like, there was just this sense of community and acceptance. And I think when you grow up hearing those stories and being reminded that you are part of a collective and a part of something bigger than yourself, it changes your way in which you move in the world. And to your point, Rosa, like, your experience, even though you were in the same house from your brother, that informed how you then chose to be in the world as well. And I just find that is all very interesting when you're a child of immigrants, or you come from such a strong lineage of that energy and understanding, how it shapes you. And while my other grandmother didn't have those kinds of experiences, being in Oakmont, that's where they ended up moving after they left East Liberty. They weren't allowed to go to the country club. They weren't even allowed to work at the country club in Oakmont. They were ostracized from a lot of spaces in Oakmont as one of the few Italians there. And so I just think of, like, what was that like, being kind of kept out of a lot of experiences, and knowing that now, I think that's also how it informs your work, is wanting to make sure everybody is included and respected and validated, regardless of whatever they're going through.
Absolutely.
So I'm assuming that indeed the dinner conversations were quite interesting because on those topics. And
yes, lots of stories from the grandmas.
from the grandmas. And also,
and they didn't take anything either. They were just like, "Oh, you're going to complain about your day? I don't think so. Here's some real stuff that, yeah, they were funny."
No, so whenever you were talking about the tailoring background of your family, Giacomini, I like to call her Giacomini. It's such a beautiful name, but Jackie, I guess, for family and friends. I mean, which she made friends and anywhere she walked. It only took her a few seconds to make someone feel extremely at ease. She had her own store, Jackie's Fabric, that was praised for the wedding gowns. Tell us about that business, and how many people she probably made happy because of her talent.
Yeah, she was quite something. She was a very, very talented seamstress. She learned from my father. And somehow along the way, she made her first wedding gown. And then people started coming to her for their wedding gowns. She made beautiful wedding gowns and was highlighted in the local paper. She made my wedding gown. Of course, I always teased her it should have been the wedding gown she wore because it was nothing like what I wanted. You know, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate that, my parents both were these artists. I didn't want what I thought was just homemade clothes. Well, homemade is tailor-made. And now, as I got older, I remember my first promotion, my parents took me to a fabric store and made me a bunch of clothes for my new job. And it was so exciting. But they were really, really very good. And my wedding gown had like 2,000 individually hand sewn beads all over the front. My mom was really a visionary, very creative, and you're right, Viviana. She had a small fabric store in town in Everett, and she did alterations there as well. But wedding gowns is kind of what she became famous for.
Mhm. So we touched a little bit about food. We're going to look at food from different perspectives. One, it's always that language that doesn't need any words, right? It expresses love, understanding, everything. It goes beyond any barrier. One of my greatest experiences actually at Power is indeed to have the honor. It's really an honor to come in and interact with the ladies trying to, and always successfully, I have to say, make wherever we agreed that it was going to be. So one, I think we talked about the holidays because again, for some people, the holidays might be the most pressure time of the year. For others, it could represent exactly the opposite. So we made pasta, we made pizzelle, we made greeting cards. I think that was very special. Tell us about maybe starting with Rosa and then Natalie. How important was also food in your family? Natalie, you also mentioned this coming from the garden. That's the most organic that you can possibly get, right? And then Giacomina's was from Emilia Romagna, which is the cradle of Italian food. So tell us a little bit some of the traditions, or maybe something that makes you think about, again, the special women in your life. And Rosa, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, I always say for an Italian family, the meal, it's not just a meal, it's an experience, right? It just is an experience. And my mom loved to cook, and if she had a sadness related to me, it was that I didn't like to cook. In fact, she was shocked when during the pandemic, I signed us up for several of your cooking classes, your online cooking classes. There we go. There she is.
I cherish
Yep.
this picture so much.
Yes, she was so shocked. She said, "You're going to sign us up for cooking?" I said, "Yeah, I figure with Viviana there, we can't fight, right? So we have to be
Take the win,
calm."
Mom.
Yeah, so we did several cooking classes. We made gnocchi. I think we made cappelletti. We did panettone.
Panettone, that's a major 2-day
That was
baking
the first
challenge.
one. Yeah, that was hard. So, but yeah, she loved to cook, and it's so interesting to me, cultural differences. I remember someone being at the house once and saying to their child to take their elbows off the table, that's incredibly rude. And I looked around, and my whole family, we had our arms on the table. We were in it, right? And I said, well, actually not in every culture, because in our culture, it means you're really enjoying your food, right? And so it was an experience. And, if you visited my house and my mom offered you something and you said no, she was so worried you were uncomfortable, or she could even become offended or think, why wouldn't you, and she would insist. And I used to say, Mom, let people make their own choice. But in Italian culture, it is love. It's offering what you have to someone else. And it's a time to talk, to share, it's just a totally an amazing experience. Even when I went to Italy most recently, while things are a little more modern than I remember growing up in my house, it's still a really important time for people, friends, family, and yep, food is very important in my life still today. Even though I don't cook it, I like to eat it.
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't agree with all of that more. Growing up, on my dad's side, my grandfather was like the one that loved to cook. So you'd go over every Sunday, they'd have the sauce going since 9 that morning. You could smell the sausages cooking. Like it was just, you knew what was coming. And we had a lot of family dinners. I mean, growing up, all of my family on my dad's side was just a few blocks away from each other. So I grew up with all of my great aunts just hanging out at my grandmother's all the time. So there was always someone bringing over spinach balls or homemade meatballs or pretzels, and you better eat them. And like, I want you to taste this. I want you to try this. And there was always this feeling of food was just a part of our lives, but also much more than that. It was an expression of love. It was an expression of community, of sharing, of caring. My home growing up, my mom was an excellent cook. And we always had whichever one of my friends maybe didn't have enough to eat, there was always room at the table for them. So we always had people in our house, always had friends over. There was always food to take home. Everybody had something to give at that table, whether it was your company or your time. But it was an amazing experience. And then on my mother's side in Iowa, yes, my grandmother was an incredible cook, and she had this old farmhouse, and there was just this old back room, and a lot of us had those sort of back rooms that were cold. And so she would just put all of her dough and her gnocchi, everything that could kind of stay frozen, even though it was not frozen. And one of my favorite times of the year when we'd go out there, and if I couldn't see my grandmother in the holidays, because we would go out every summer to visit and stay like at least a month, but if I couldn't see her that Christmas, she would send these huge tins, and she would make 20 different types of cookies, pizzelles and fudges and lemon and, Italian wedding cookies, all these different things. And I look back and I'm like, oh God, I took for granted all of those experiences. Like now I love to cook now. I've been vegan for 15 years. And when I started to learn how to cook, I used to say, oh, I wish my grandmother was here because I didn't appreciate what she was doing in that garden. We used to joke like 20% of the earth's oxygen came from her backyard because she crossbred her own roses. I mean, she was so smart and just knew so much and could grow anything in that backyard. And I wish I had that green thumb, and I wish I had taken more appreciation instead of being a teenager and finding it all very like annoying, and it's like, oh, Graham, why are you bothering? And now I'm just like, what a woman, like that's incredible. So yeah, food is love for sure, and always has been in our family. And even now, I mean, we still have family dinners every week or every other week, and my cousins and everybody, because it's just an important thing to do, especially now that there's some new little babies running around too. We want to keep all of that magic, because I had so many family members so close to me growing up.
Yeah. So we're approaching the closing of this beautiful conversation. But I do have a question for both of you. One is maybe if you can highlight a special project or initiative that you are working on that you would like the public, the audience to know about. Be as specific as you like, if there are dates, events, websites, anything that I really like. And because, again, we're going back to the original theme of International Women's Day, what advice would you give to young women who are trying to honor their heritage while forging their own path? Okay. Rosa, we were talking about building, and we said that we're not going to spoil the surprise, but those cranes had been working, and I think they might have disappeared. I don't know. But tell us about the beautiful Power Campus that is just around my corner.
Yes. So Power's been around for 33 years, and we've had this vision to locate all of our programs under one roof or in one general area. So Powerhouse is a 25-bed residential treatment facility in Swissvale, and it's in the former St. Anselm Convent. Adjacent to that was the Catholic elementary school, St. Anselm, eventually Word of God Elementary School, and it has been vacant maybe 7, 8 years. And our vision was to buy that school, renovate, and move all of our other programs so that the two buildings together became the Power Campus. And the reason for that is, as you can imagine, and you've said it a few times yourself, Viviana, what people struggle with when they're make this decision to try to get into recovery, it's just incredible. And for women, it is even more difficult. And so here we are providing drug and alcohol treatment, but we're sending them clear across town for another service. And maybe they have to drop their child off, taking 2 buses before they can even come to an outpatient counseling session. So our vision was to locate all of our services together in one place and bring on partners like healthcare, childcare, workforce development right on site, so that we're not constantly sending them all over creation, right? And the hope is that they will stay engaged in their recovery longer. They'll go from one treatment to another. And they'll really be more successful, because studies show the longer you're in treatment, the more successful you are at recovery. In fact, a minimum of 90 days. And so the campus is so exciting. It's 3 floors. There's a community, the lower level is a community kind of feel to it, where we're inviting the community in. There are meeting rooms, there's a cafe kind of area. There will be a childcare center on the ground level. And then our treatment services and back office support is on the 1st and 2nd floor. So we're incredibly thankful to the community who has been so generous. It was a $14 million campaign, and we exceeded our goal a bit. So we're really proud of that. We should be moving in the next couple of months, but the final project will be done probably by the end of this calendar year. And we'll be inviting the community in to come see the good work. We've been really lucky that Swissvale has been so welcoming from the start. The contractors tell us that people come by all the time and say, oh, it's so good to see this building back in use. And I got married in that church, or my kids went to school at that school. So we are really happy to be in that community. And just a quick plug, the Purple Party is coming up April 24th. So if you want a fun place to go, check out our website at power-recovery.com. Tickets are only $65. It's a lot of fun, and wear your purple.
It's an awesome party. One of my favorites. Absolutely. It's an awesome party and an awesome cause. Yeah, on my end, I'm working on a new project with WQED, and the working title is called Space for Yins, and it is about immigrants and how they're changing the fabric of our communities and how they make our communities stronger. And I think you'll both appreciate my first episode is launching this spring, and it's focused on Bloomfield's Little Italy and exploring the Italian heritage of that community. And also, it's not really Little Italy anymore. It's embraced a lot of different community members and spaces. And so I'm really looking towards the changes and how we have to embrace who's coming to our communities now, just as we needed to embrace the people that helped to build the foundation for these spaces. So I'm hopefully going to be launching that this spring. And I'm also working on my second episode, which is based in Beachview. And we're going to be looking at the Latin communities of Beachview and the wonderful things that they are bringing to re-energize that neighborhood. So that's a very exciting project. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. You can obviously follow me on social media at Natalie Bencivenga. I'm on all the different platforms. You can check out my website. I'm also on Substack. I just started a Facts Over Fear Substack, so you can stay up with political analyses there. And I want to just say this for young women coming up. And I know I had mentioned it before, but you're going to hear from people that you can't do things. It's not your time. You're not ready. Don't listen to that, because the reality is it's never actually going to be your time if you allow other people to dictate your trajectory. Follow your instincts. You are more qualified for things than you realize. And you have the skills and the competence to become wonderful leaders. And just to think about the we, not just the me, when you're thinking about your path moving forward, because the world opens up the more you open up to the world. And so that would be my advice for young women coming up.
These are indeed a very, very valuable message. And again, totally in line with kind of your motto of inspire, educate, and activate, right? I'm stealing your words.
No, I love it. I love it.
So unfortunately, our time together is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop, and it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. And if you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at italianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. I would like to thank my wonderful Wonder Women guests, Rosa Verdiglione Davis and Natalie Bencivenga. Celebrate all the women in the world for International Women's Day on March 8th. Our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano and La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.